Modern horror movies and video games have settled on a standard image for the Wendigo, a tall, skeletal creature with branching antlers and a sun-bleached deer skull for a head. Anishinaabe scholars point out that these antlers are a complete fabrication. In the history of the legend, this specific visual trait appears only recently, surfacing after the invention of the internet and DVDs. If the antlers and the skull face are modern inventions, the question remains, what did the original entity actually look like? To find the traditional description, we have to look past these cinema tropes and return to the historical winters of the Algonquian-speaking peoples. Replacing the traditional legend with a generic forest beast changes the meaning of the story, shifting the focus away from a specific warning about human behavior. The legend grew out of the Great Lakes and eastern Canadian forests, regions where winter survival depended entirely on the community's ability to share resources. Map records from 1636 show this region as Nouvelle France. This is where French Jesuit missionary Paul Lejeune first documented the Wendigo in writing, though the oral tradition of the Ojibwe, Cree, and Innu peoples had already existed for centuries. In these environments, famine was a recurring threat. When food became scarce, isolation and desperation tested the very boundaries of the social contract. The core of the legend describes a hunter lost in the frozen woods. Driven by starvation, he commits the act of cannibalism. In doing so, he is possessed by the Wendigo spirit, losing his humanity to a permanent demonic hunger. The original Wendigo functioned as a social deterrent. It was a warning that isolation and selfishness during a crisis could transform a person into something unrecognizable to their community. The traditional visual reconstruction starts with a humanoid form. Its skin is gray and stretched so tightly over its bones that it appears skeletal, giving off a distinct odor of decay. Its face is described as a nightmare of starvation. Specifically, the creature has no lips, having chewed them away in a frenzy of hunger. The creature can reach 15 feet in height, but its distinct trait is growing with every meal. As it consumes human flesh, its frame expands to match. Because the body grows as it feeds, it is mathematically impossible to ever feel full. This legend eventually entered the field of psychiatry as Wendigo psychosis, a syndrome where individuals in extreme isolation develop a compulsive craving for human flesh, alongside a deep fear of becoming a cannibal. The physical traits described in the myth provide a literal map of greed. It is the visualization of a hunger that grows faster than it can be satisfied. Returning to the Hollywood antler design reveals how the redesign alters the cultural impact of the story. By moving the creature further away from a human appearance, the narrative shift removes the personal responsibility at the heart of the legend. The deer skull turns a respected spiritual warning into a generic monster trope. This transformation strips the entity of its role as a mirror for human behavior and reclassifies it as a public domain horror character. This separates the Wendigo from centuries of cultural weight. While modern media monsters are often created for a temporary thrill, the traditional Wendigo was a vital component of a community's moral framework. Replacing the humanoid Wendigo with a beast silences the ancient warning. The redesign allows the audience to look at a monster in the woods instead of looking at the potential for greed within themselves. Today, First Nations communities apply the Wendigo spirit to modern crises. They see the same insatiable hunger in corporate greed and environmental destruction. The creature's core trait, a hunger that expands as it consumes, parallels the mechanics of hyperconsumerism, where the act of acquiring more only increases the desire for the next thing. The legend remains a study of the descent from human to entity. It tracks the moment when desperation and greed finally replace empathy, leaving behind nothing but an empty, growing void.